Hey, sweetheart, you lost? This isn't Walmart! The mocking shout cut through the Sterling Marksman Club like a rifle crack. Chase Whitmore, the five-time national champion, had spotted an outsider in his kingdom, and the crowd of wealthy members roared with laughter at his cruel joke. But the woman he mocked, Sarah Collins, didn't stop walking. She clutched the worn strap of her purse tighter, her face pale, but her step steady. She was used to being underestimated. Before diving deeper into this unbelievable story, make sure to subscribe, like, and share, because what started with that insult ended in a way no one in that club could have imagined. Now, back to that moment of humiliation. The Sterling Marksman Club wasn't a regular shooting range. It was a temple of privilege. Marble floors, mahogany walls, glass cases showing off rifles worth more than most cars, and a membership list filled with politicians, CEOs, and heirs. This was a place where money and arrogance weighed heavier than skill. Sarah knew she didn't belong the second she walked in. At the reception desk, the young blonde attendant gave her one quick look, from her thrift store cardigan to her scuffed sneakers, and smirked. "Open session today?" Sarah asked softly. "Members only," the receptionist replied without even lifting her head from the phone. But Sarah reached into her purse and pulled out a crumpled envelope. "I have a day pass. It was a gift." The receptionist sighed and slid her a clipboard, still wearing that tight little smile that said, "You don't belong here." Across the room, Chase Whitmore was finishing another flawless round. Tall, tanned, dressed in custom gear, he looked every bit the champion he was. He thrived on attention, and when he noticed Sarah, his smirk widened. "Well, well," he drawled, loud enough for the entire range to hear. "Looks like somebody's mom wandered in from a PTA meeting." The laughter was harsher this time, echoing against the walls as Sarah hurried to the farthest stall on the basic range. She set her purse down, trying to ignore the eyes burning into her back. The range grew quiet as Sarah Collins lifted the pistol. To the wealthy members of the Sterling Marksman Club, it was just entertainment, an outsider about to embarrass herself. To Sarah, it was something else entirely. As she lined up the Glock, her mind drifted back to another shooting range. Years earlier, David Collins, her husband, stood behind her, adjusting her shoulders with a gentle touch. He was a Marine sniper, tall and steady, his voice calm even when the world wasn't. "Relax your stance, feet shoulder width." "Breathe, Sarah," he whispered. Shooting isn't about aggression. It's about control. You control your body, your breath, your fear. That's all. Back then, Sarah had laughed nervously, thinking she would never get it right. But David had been patient. Every time she pulled the trigger, he'd murmur encouragement until one day her shot landed dead center. "You're a natural," he'd told her with a proud smile. "Steady hands. Perfect vision. And you stay calm when it matters most." That's rarer than you think. That memory cut deep now. David had been gone for 3 years. His final deployment ended with a folded flag and a funeral at Arlington. Since then, Sarah hadn't touched a gun. She had locked them away, as if hiding them could hide the pain. But today, standing in this gilded cage of arrogance, she felt his presence again. Almost as if he were standing behind her, whispering those same words. "Breathe, Sarah. Control." Back in the present, Chase Whitmore leaned against the divider, smirk plastered across his face. "Any day now," he sneered, loud enough for the crowd to chuckle. Sarah exhaled slowly, blocking him out. She found the familiar rhythm David had drilled into her. Inhale, exhale halfway, hold. The noise of the room faded until there was only her, the Glock, and the target 50 yards away. She squeezed the trigger. The shot rang out, sharp and clean. The crowd went silent. The mechanical whir of the target retrieval system seemed unbearably loud as the paper slowly reeled forward. Step by step, the tension grew. Chase folded his arms, trying to look confident. But his eyes betrayed a flicker of doubt. When the target finally reached the stall, the truth was undeniable. A perfect hole sat dead center in the bullseye. The silence that followed felt heavy, like the entire room was holding its breath. Then came a gasp, a murmur, and the shifting of feet as people craned their necks for a closer look. Sarah lowered the Glock calmly, her expression unreadable. To her, it wasn't luck. It was memory. It was a promise kept. Chase snatched the target from the clip, glaring at it as if sheer willpower could change reality. "Beginner's luck," he said finally, forcing a laugh. Anyone can get lucky once. But the tightness in his jaw betrayed him. He wasn't laughing inside. Rebecca Johnson, the club's manager, stepped forward, her professional mask slipping into genuine admiration. "That was an exceptional shot, Miss Collins." Sarah gave a polite nod. "Thank you." But Chase wasn't ready to let go. He puffed out his chest, trying to reclaim the spotlight. "Hold on, one shot doesn't mean anything. Let's make this interesting." The crowd leaned in, sensing the stakes rising. Chase pulled a sleek leather checkbook from his jacket pocket and slapped it against the counter. $50,000, he declared. 3 bullseyes. 75 yards. If she hits them, I'll pay the money to whatever charity she wants. If she misses even once, she admits she cheated and she leaves this club forever. The whispers turned into a buzz. The stakes weren't just high, they were impossible. Even seasoned shooters struggled at 75 yards with a basic Glock. Rebecca frowned, stepping closer. "Mr. Whitmore, maybe we should—" Chase waved her off without looking. "Stay out of this, Rebecca. The lady wants to play, let's give her a real game." All eyes turned to Sarah. For a long moment, she said nothing. Her heart pounded. She hadn't come here for wagers or glory, just to keep a promise to her late husband. But then Chase's smirk returned, and something in Sarah snapped. It wasn't just about her anymore. It was about every person who had ever been dismissed, mocked, or underestimated. She twisted her wedding ring, feeling the comfort of David's memory. Then she looked Chase dead in the eye. "I'll take your challenge," she said softly. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Some shook their heads, already predicting her failure. Others leaned forward, eager to witness the spectacle. Chase grinned. "Excellent. Ladies and gentlemen, we're about to see the shortest competition in club history." But deep inside, behind his arrogant smirk, there was a flicker of something new in Chase Whitmore's eyes, something he hadn't felt in years. Part 3 script, third person, expanded 700 words. The crowd pressed closer, excitement buzzing like static in the air. $50,000, 3 bullseyes, 75 yards. Most of the onlookers thought Sarah Collins was walking into humiliation, but Sarah wasn't focused on them. She only saw the target. She stepped forward with calm precision, loading her Glock with steady hands. Her posture shifted, subtle but unmistakable. Shoulders relaxed, spine straight, feet anchored firmly. Those who truly understood shooting recognized it immediately. This wasn't a beginner fumbling through her first shots. This was someone trained. Chase Whitmore leaned against the divider, his grin wide, voice booming for the crowd. "Ladies and gentlemen, you're about to see why amateurs shouldn't wander into arenas meant for professionals." The snickers returned. But Sarah tuned them out. She breathed in, held, exhaled halfway. Her husband David's voice echoed in her memory. "When the pressure is on, fall back on your training. Let your body remember what your mind forgets." She fired the first shot. The crack split the silence. The paper target began its slow, agonizing crawl back. Chase smirked as if he already knew the outcome, until the target reached them, dead center. Bullseye. A ripple went through the room. A few gasps. Someone muttered, "No way." Chase's smile faltered, but he quickly covered it with a laugh. "Beginner's luck again." Sarah reset her stance. "Second shot!" Her hands didn't tremble. Her breathing remained even. She squeezed the trigger, another perfect crack. Another perfect bullseye. Now the murmurs grew louder. The laughter died. People shifted uneasily, realizing this wasn't a fluke. Chase's jaw tightened, his knuckles whitening as he gripped the counter. 2 shots don't mean anything," he muttered under his breath. But Sarah heard him. She twisted her wedding ring once, the way she always did when she needed David's strength. His presence felt close, as if he stood just behind her, steadying her. The third shot was the most important. The room seemed to hold its breath. Sarah lined up, exhaled, and pulled the trigger. The target reeled back slowly. each click of the retrieval system like a drum beat in the tense silence. When it arrived, there it was, another perfect hole in the bullseye, 3 in a row, 75 yards. Impossible for an amateur. But Sarah Collins had just done it. For a moment, the Sterling Marksman Club stood in stunned silence. Then voices erupted, gasps, shouts, even a few cheers. The unthinkable had happened. Sarah placed the Glock calmly on the counter, her face composed. She hadn't done this for applause. She'd done it for David, for the promise she had made him, but Chase Whitmore's composure cracked. His face reddened, his jaw clenched, his chest rose and fell with sharp breaths. He snatched the target from the clip, examining it as if sheer willpower could reveal a trick. This is impossible, he barked. His voice was louder now, harsher, almost desperate. Nobody walks in off the street and shoots like this. She must have rigged something. The crowd murmured uneasily. Some still wanted to believe him. Others, especially those with shooting experience, knew better. They had seen her stance, her breathing, her control. That kind of discipline wasn't faked. Rebecca Johnson, the club manager, stepped forward, her tone measured but firm. Mr. Whitmore, I witnessed each shot. There was no rigging. Ms. Collins's performance was extraordinary, yes, but legitimate. Chase rounded on her, his finger stabbing the air. Stay out of this, Rebecca. You think I don't know when something's off? This woman doesn't belong here. Sarah stayed silent, her expression calm, even as her heart raced. She had expected arrogance, but not this level of fury. The crowd shifted, waiting for her to defend herself. But Sarah didn't. She simply stood there, steady as stone, letting the silence hang. That silence rattled Chase more than any words could have. He turned back to the audience, raising his voice. Fine, if she wants to prove herself, let's settle this properly. A real competition. Not one lucky stunt. The crowd buzzed again, sensing the escalation. Chase's pride was on the line now, and he wasn't about to let it end here. 1 week from today, he declared, a formal match. 10 stations, different firearms, club equipment, no excuses. If she wins, I'll pay the 50 grand. But when I win, his eyes narrowed at Sarah, she admits publicly she's a fraud. And she never sets foot in this club again. Rebecca tried to intervene. Chase, maybe this isn't the time, but he waved her off. No, the time is now. All eyes turned to Sarah. She hadn't wanted any of this. She came only to keep a promise. But looking at Chase's smug face, at the crowd that had laughed at her from the moment she walked in, something deeper stirred inside her. Calmly, without raising her voice, she said, I accept. The crowd erupted again, half shocked, half thrilled. But as Sarah gathered her belongings, Chase's smile slipped. His hands shook as he pulled out his phone. Find out everything about her, he hissed into the receiver. I don't care what it takes. Because behind the anger in Chase Whitmore's eyes was something else. Something he hadn't felt in years. The announcement of the competition spread through the Sterling Marksman Club like wildfire. Within hours, word had leaked beyond its polished walls, carried on whispers and phone calls. A mysterious woman had humiliated Chase Whitmore, and now she was set to face him in a formal duel. By the next morning, the story had already become gossip among Boston's wealthiest circles. Who was she? Where had she come from? And how could she possibly stand a chance against a man like Chase? Sarah Collins didn't care about gossip. She hadn't asked for this spotlight. All she wanted was to keep her promise, to keep practicing, just as David had once asked her to. But the promise had grown into something larger. For Chase Whitmore, though, this wasn't about promises. It was about pride. In his penthouse overlooking the Charles River, he paced with a glass of whiskey in his hand, his smile long gone. The competition was set for 1 week. Sponsors and board members had already begun turning it into an event, complete with media coverage. It was supposed to be his chance to reassert dominance, to remind everyone who the king really was. But Chase wasn't leaving anything to chance. He slammed his empty glass onto the counter and picked up his phone. Dig into her, he barked at his private investigator. Her background, her past, everything. Nobody shoots like that without training. Find out where she learned. The investigator hesitated. It might take some time, Mr. Whitmore. You've got a week, Chase snapped. And I don't care what it takes. Get me answers. While Chase plotted, Sarah tried to live her life quietly. She went back to work at her accounting firm, but focus was impossible. Numbers blurred in front of her eyes, replaced with images of Chase's smirk, the laughter of the crowd, the weight of the Glock in her hands. That evening, she drove to a small public range on the outskirts of the city. Unlike the Sterling Club, this place was ordinary. Faded paint, cheap ear protection for rent, and working-class regulars who didn't care who you were. Here, Sarah could breathe. She set up her stall, loaded her pistol, and began practicing. Shot after shot, she drilled herself, repeating the rhythm David had taught her. Breathe, focus, fire. She wasn't just practicing for the competition. She was practicing to silence the ghosts of doubt that whispered. She didn't belong, but every shot also reopened old wounds. She remembered. The last time she and David had gone shooting together, 2 days before his final deployment. He had been unusually quiet that day, his eyes lingering on her more than usual. "Promise me something," he had said, resting his hand over hers. "What?" she had asked, half smiling. "Promise me you'll keep practicing. Even when I'm not here." She had laughed nervously, not realizing the weight of his words. She had promised, and now, years later, standing in that shabby public range, she whispered into the empty air, "I'm keeping it, David. I'm keeping it." Meanwhile, Chase's obsession only grew. The more he thought about Sarah's calmness, her perfect stance, her control, the more it unsettled him. That wasn't luck. That was training. 3 days later, his investigator called back with the first pieces of information. Her name is Sarah Collins, 35, works as an accountant. Moved to Boston 3 years ago from Virginia Beach. No criminal record. No competition background. Clean as a whistle. Chase clenched his jaw. "That's impossible." "Nobody shoots like that without history. Dig deeper." "I'll check Virginia Beach," the investigator replied cautiously. "Maybe she trained there. Shooting clubs, instructors, anything." "Do it," Chase ordered. "I need answers before Saturday." He ended the call, frustration boiling. He poured another drink, staring at the wall where his trophies and medals hung. For years he had been untouchable, and yet now a woman with no record, no pedigree, had rattled him. He didn't just want to beat her. He wanted to destroy her. By midweek, the whispers around Boston had turned into headlines in niche sporting blogs. The mystery woman versus the champion. Some mocked her. Others admired her boldness. But almost everyone agreed Chase Whitmore couldn't afford to lose, and Sarah. She kept practicing, alone at night, pushing herself until her hands ached, replaying David's words in her mind. When the investigator finally called Chase again, his tone was different, sharper, almost reverent. "Mr. Whitmore." "I found something," Chase straightened. "Tell me." Virginia Beach was the key. Sarah Collins was married to Master Sergeant David Collins, Marine sniper, highly decorated. Nicknamed the Phantom, Chase froze. His heart pounded. The Phantom? Even he knew that name. A legend in military circles, a sniper who made impossible shots look routine, the investigator continued. He was killed in action 3 years ago. But before that, he trained her. Word is she was a natural. Better than some recruits. Chase said nothing. His mind spun. Sarah wasn't an amateur. She wasn't lucky. She was the widow of the Phantom, carrying his legacy in her hands. For the first time in years, Chase Whitmore felt something that rattled him to his core. The days leading up to the competition blurred together. For most members of the Sterling Marksman Club, the event was nothing more than entertainment, a duel between the reigning champion and an unknown challenger. But for Sarah Collins, it was heavier. This wasn't about prize money or glory. It was about keeping a promise to her late husband. And for Chase Whitmore, it was about survival. His pride, his reputation, his empire of arrogance. Losing wasn't an option. By Thursday, the Sterling Club's board confirmed the event would be held Saturday. 10 stations, 10 different firearms, all provided by the club. On paper, it was to ensure fairness. In reality, it was Chase's doing. He'd pushed the rules to favor himself. That night in his penthouse, Chase sipped whiskey and smiled at his reflection in the floor-to-ceiling windows. His voice was low as he spoke into his phone. "Everything's arranged?" "Yes, Mr. Whitmore," replied his technician. "We've made subtle adjustments. Nothing obvious. Trigger pulls, scope calibrations, enough to throw her off unless she knows every platform inside and out." "And the final station?" Chase asked. "A Macmillan TAC 338, custom tuned to your specifications. She won't stand a chance." Chase's grin widened. "Perfect. On Saturday, I'll end this fairy tale once and for all." Meanwhile, Sarah sat at her kitchen table, surrounded by scattered notes and an old leather-bound notebook. It wasn't hers. It had belonged to David, his logbook. Pages filled with formulas, wind calculations, shooting drills, even little notes about her progress. She ran her fingers over his handwriting, remembering his voice. "Adapt and overcome. Conditions change. Equipment fails. But if you control yourself, you control the outcome." Still, doubt gnawed at her. 10 different weapons, some she had barely touched. And Chase wasn't just skilled, he was ruthless. The knock at her door startled her. When she opened it, she froze. "Michael Reeves," the man said simply. He was older now, broad-shouldered, with eyes that had seen too much. "I served with David." Sarah blinked, speechless. Michael gave her a small, reassuring smile. "I heard what's happening. Thought you might need a hand?" "Inside, over black coffee," he explained. "David talked about you more than you realize. Said you had the calmest hands he'd ever seen on a civilian. Said you were better than some of the guys he trained." Sarah swallowed hard. "That was a long time ago." "Then let's wake it up," Michael replied. For the next 2 days, he trained her. They drove out to a quiet range where he pushed her through drills, different rifles, heavier calibers, faster transitions. He tested her under pressure, barking commands the way soldiers did in combat, trying to break her focus. But Sarah didn't break. She adapted. She remembered. With each shot, her confidence grew. On Friday afternoon, as they packed up, Michael handed her something small. A folded slip of paper. "David's formulas," he said softly. "He gave me a copy once, just in case. He wanted you to have every tool you'd ever need." Sarah's eyes burned with tears. "Why are you helping me?" Michael's voice cracked just slightly. "Because when you lose a brother, you take care of what mattered to him. David's gone, but you're not. And he'd want you ready for this." Saturday came. The Sterling Marksman Club looked nothing like it had a week earlier. News vans lined the street, cameras set up at the entrance, reporters murmuring about the duel between the champion and the widow. Inside, the board had turned the event into a spectacle. Digital scoreboards, bleachers full of spectators, even catered champagne. Rebecca Johnson, the club manager, moved briskly between stations, checking weapons. She frowned. Something was off. The trigger weights, the scope adjustments, they weren't standard. But there was nothing she could prove, nothing she could flag officially. When Sarah arrived, dressed simply in jeans and a navy button-down, Rebecca pulled her aside. Her voice was low, urgent. "Be careful. The equipment's been altered. Nothing major, but enough to give Chase the edge." Sarah nodded once. "Thank you." She wasn't surprised. She had expected sabotage. David had taught her to expect it. The arena filled quickly. Chase arrived flanked by sponsors and photographers, every inch the star. He wore a tailored shooting jacket embroidered with his name, shaking hands and flashing smiles for the cameras. When his eyes met Sarah's across the room, his grin hardened. He strode over, lowering his voice so only she could hear. "Last chance to walk away. Nobody would blame you." Sarah met his gaze, calm and steady. "My husband taught me about pressure, Mr. Whitmore. I'll manage." Chase's jaw twitched. He straightened and raised his voice for the crowd. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to today's competition. 10 stations, 10 firearms, 1 champion. Let's see if lightning really strikes twice." The applause rolled through the room. Sarah stepped up to the first station, her husband's logbook tucked in her bag. Michael Reeves sat quietly in the back row, watching with the sharp eyes of a soldier. The whistle blew, and the duel began. The Sterling Marksman Club had never seen anything like it. Rows of spectators leaned forward in their seats. Cameras recorded every movement, and the scoreboard glowed bright above the range. 10 stations, 10 firearms, 1 duel. At the first station, Chase Whitmore was flawless, his years of competition experience on full display. The crowd applauded every bullseye, every smooth reload. Sarah Collins, however, approached differently. Quiet, focused, her stance steady, her breathing controlled. Shot after shot, her rhythm never faltered. By the fourth station, Chase held a slim lead. He smirked at Sarah between rounds, trying to rattle her, but she never broke eye contact with the targets. She remembered David's words. Equipment fails. Conditions change. Adapt and overcome. At the fifth station, she discovered the sabotage. The trigger on the Sig Sauer was heavier than standard, clearly adjusted to throw her off. A whisper ran through the crowd when her first bullet landed wide of center. Chase grinned, certain she was slipping, but Sarah closed her eyes for a moment, inhaled, and adjusted her grip. She squeezed again, bullseye, then another, and another. She matched Chase's score despite the handicap. The crowd erupted, no longer laughing, no longer mocking. Now they were watching her with awe. By the eighth station, the scoreboard showed what no one thought possible. Sarah was nearly tied with the reigning champion. The whispers grew louder, and many in the audience shifted their applause from Chase to her. At the ninth station, Chase approached Sarah between rounds, his voice a sharp whisper. Impressive. The Phantom would be proud. But don't forget, I know who you are, and I'm about to remind everyone why I'm the best. Sarah's eyes didn't flinch. Then you also know he valued integrity above all else. Something you'll never understand. Chase's smirk faltered, just for a heartbeat. When the ninth station ended, the scores were dead even. Everything came down to the final test, the Macmillan TAC-338 rifle. A weapon Chase had mastered. A weapon Sarah had barely touched, until Michael Reeves had trained her just days earlier. The crowd hushed as Chase took his place first. His movements were smooth, confident, mechanical. Shot after shot punched into the center rings. 9 out of 10. A nearly perfect score. Beat that, he muttered, loud enough for the audience to hear. Sarah stepped up. The rifle was heavier than she remembered, the scope slightly off, just as Rebecca had warned. It was sabotage, but she didn't protest. Instead, she reached into her bag and touched David's logbook. His formulas, his calculations, his voice. Trust what you know. Trust yourself. She adjusted the scope by instinct, remembering the drills Michael had run her through. Her first shot landed clean, dead center. A ripple of applause. Second, third, fourth, each shot precise, controlled, deliberate. The crowd grew louder with every bullseye. By the sixth, every spectator was on their feet, the tension unbearable. Chase's face had gone pale, his jaw tight. On her final shot, just as she steadied her breathing, a sharp flash of light reflected across her scope. Someone in Chase's entourage, deliberately trying to blind her. The distraction was obvious, but Sarah didn't flinch. She steadied her hands, twisted her wedding ring once, and squeezed the trigger. The 10th shot tore into the bullseye, as perfect as the first. For a heartbeat, silence. Then the room exploded. Cheers, applause, even a standing ovation. The scoreboard lit up. Winner? Sarah Collins. Chase's mask of composure shattered. He stormed forward, jabbing his finger at the target. This is rigged! Nobody shoots like that. She cheated! Rebecca Johnson stepped forward, her voice sharp. No, Mr. Whitmore, the only cheating here was yours. She raised a tablet showing security footage of his technician tampering with the firearms before the match. Gasps rippled through the crowd. The applause for Sarah swelled again. Louder, stronger, admiration not just for her victory, but for the way she had overcome sabotage meant to destroy her. Chase's sponsors turned away. Board members whispered. His empire crumbled in real time. Sarah simply laid the rifle down, calm and steady. She looked at him once, her voice quiet but strong. You owe $50,000 to the Veterans Support Foundation. Pay it, and then leave me alone. Chase didn't answer. He couldn't. Security escorted him out while the crowd cheered Sarah's name. Days later, Sarah stood at a different range, the newly established training center for veterans. funded by the donation Chase had been forced to make. She looked out at a group of men and women carrying visible and invisible scars from service. "My name is Sarah Collins," she told them. "I'm not a champion. I'm not a soldier. I'm just someone who kept practicing because someone I loved once asked me to. And today I'm passing that on to you." Her voice didn't shake. Her hands didn't tremble. For the first time in years, Sarah wasn't just surviving. She was living. As the class began, she twisted her wedding ring one last time and whispered under her breath, "This one was for you, David, and for anyone watching who's ever been laughed at, underestimated, or told they don't belong. Remember Sarah's story. One woman walked into a place she wasn't wanted, faced arrogance, sabotage, and fear, and still stood her ground. Never underestimate the quiet ones." If you enjoyed this story and want to see more powerful underdog tales like this, make sure to subscribe, hit the like button, and share this video, because this is just the beginning.